I think the cybersecurity industry as a whole is built on a number of misconceptions and biases, and these can be quite dangerous for pen testers and people involved in offensive security, because we've got a situation where terms like secure or safe or protective don't convey any actual meaning. They're a feeling. They're not measurable. And this can become frustrating for pen testers and disheartening, because we don't know what people want. We don't know what people are talking about. They're talking about wanting to be secure, and we're trying to provide that type of assurance. But it's confusing. It's confusing for testers. It's confusing for leaders. The job of a pen tester and of offensive security services is to uncover vulnerabilities and provide some kind of actionable insight into that. But where you have an industry which is built on these nebulous terms and nebulous promises, it's very hard to demonstrate value. And worse still, within the OffSec space, that disconnection creates high turnover and disengagements with pen test teams. The problem with the word security is that it sets up false expectations. It fosters optimism bias at every level. So we're all optimists. I guess all biases are part of the human condition. So optimism bias is that thing where we tend to think that something bad won't happen to us. It's always the next person. The warnings don't apply to me. How many times do people look at health warnings and assume it won't happen to them? We all do it. But as pen testers, then if you encounter an organisation that's convinced they're doing enough, whether it's a compliance process or whether they've got tooling or whatever else it is, and then the tester finds critical gaps, then sometimes those findings can be downplayed because people will say, well, that doesn't affect us. That's not an issue for us, and this kind of perpetuates the illusion of safety. And then this causes frustration as well for testers. Again, testers are not just identifying risks. There is a sense that we're trying to help organisations improve in some way by telling them things that they don't know. But when optimism bias clouds that discussion, then it's very hard to make any kind of progress. Another characteristic of the offensive security space is the us versus them mentality. And I'm not going to say that this is necessarily one side is worse than the other, because then I'm part of that problem. But there is a persistent us v them mentality between security teams, pen testers, engineers, developers, and the rest of the organisation. Security is often seen as the team that says no to something. Engineers feel like their creativity is being constrained, or they're being criticised or attacked. And as security leaders, the job there, it really is to bridge that gap. But certainly pen testers do need to be better communicators, not just to explain what's wrong, but also why it matters. So if you imagine this idea that everything is based upon this strange concept of security, which is a feeling rather than a fact, it's very hard to express the significance of a finding, and it is a challenge. So organisations need to foster environments where security isn't adversarial in that sense, but collaborative. And without that, then pen testers in particular will feel undervalued or overlooked. Engineering teams and technical teams themselves will feel alienated, and leadership begins to fail and see diminishing returns on that sort of engagement. But being a pen tester isn't just about finding vulnerabilities, it's how they are communicated to the client. And that's because there's a knowledge gap between clients and stakeholders. They often lack technical expertise, and testers need to be able to translate those complex vulnerabilities into some kind of language that decision makers can understand. And poor communication at that point creates confusion, and then the actual detail, the important stuff, can get lost in that confusion. And then again, that causes frustration amongst all parties. There's a collaborative element as well here, where you communicate clearly with the client. This facilitates knowledge sharing. We're all on the same page. Insights are being shared. Effort isn't being duplicated. And there's genuine collaboration. engineering teams, development teams, to communicate with those guys successfully is absolutely vital. If you can't communicate with them, then you're not going to get your point across. Pen testers who are able to frame issues in terms of, say, quality or business impact or something which the client can understand, then really you can win allies rather than create enemies and create friction. Beyond technical expertise, there are other broader business contexts that need to be understood by pen testers, by people working in offensive security. The risk landscape, what is a priority for the client, what is a priority for us is maybe not a priority for the client, and that's something we'll have to learn to live with. If we think something is a high severity, a high impact, then it's upon us to explain that effectively. It's not upon the client to automatically understand it. Again, creating that bridge between technical findings and strategic recommendations is quite a skill, and is quite a difficult skill. It takes time and practice and a few mistakes to get it right. Testers also need to be able to solve little problems in real time. I mean, part of doing a test is solving lots of little problems in sequence to build towards to an end game of some kind. But the client will often ask for insights immediately on the spot during a test, particularly if there's a high severity issue or if it's a very critical system. And then learning those consulting skills of composure and clarity under pressure, again, very difficult things to achieve. And the way to do this is to hopefully be under the guidance of someone who is perhaps more experienced, and they can kind of oversee this and help people through that process. Otherwise, particularly for less experienced testers, that whole process of the instant insight, the consulting engagement element of it can feel a bit like being thrown under the bus, which is not pleasant. But professionalism is how you build trust. And trust is obviously critical in all types of relationship around the world and around life itself. But in our context, communicating openly and clearly and constructively is something which enables us to be seen as partners and as collaborators rather than critics. And our behaviour, and I mean, there's an element now of basics as well, professional behaviour, turning up on time, being prepared to work, all that kind of stuff. They're basics too. We'll take those as read, but they are the foundations of building trust. When you have a team that communicates well, then this builds a sense of purpose within the team, a shared purpose. Everyone is on the same page. People feel less exposed, less burned out. They're more engaged. They feel more supported. And obviously the business benefit from that, from the pentest company's perspective, is less turnover. People tend not to leave if they're happy. And one of the things that makes people unhappy is bad morale, poor culture. I think the way forward for measurable outcomes in security engagements is moving away from the vague security discussion, which, as we've said, is a vague concept, more of a feeling than a measurement, and moving towards something more measurable, actionable. If I was advising a team member to frame their work, I would say, well, yes, you need the technical content there, but try to summarize it in terms of outcomes that matter to the client. Is there a business continuity issue here? Is there a quality issue? Is there an operational security issue? Is there even a revenue issue? All these things are important to business. Now, we're not expected to be experts in the client's business. That is their expertise, but we are supposed to be sympathetic to it, and we are supposed to engage and have an understanding of it. I think doing any kind of testing where you have literally no idea what the client does is a really poor way to start a pen test. It's very valuable to have an understanding before you start about what the client does, what their market is, what their concerns are. So by focusing on those areas, you can shift the narrative, less about fear and more about improvement. So if you're leading a pen test team, it's not just delivering reports. It's about helping organizations. I mean, we are there to help. I often say to people, we're not here to make the world a better place, which is just me being cynical, but we are there to assist our clients and help them improve. Where pen testers are engaged in that way, you see benefits in terms of retention, and you see the satisfaction levels going up within the team. So where testers see that their work is making a difference, and they're not trapped in some kind of adversarial cycle with the client, then that's very satisfactory. And then, of course, that builds on the idea that in order to get there, you need more than those technical skills. To break out of that adversarial cycle, you need all the things we've talked about: translating technical findings into actionable advice, thinking strategically, contextualizing what you found, building confidence by exhibiting some of those basic consulting skills, and being professional. So all those things are important to ensure that testers are not just effective, but ultimately indispensable.